Big topics, big ideas, and practical policy solutions. This is Leaders on the Frontier with your host, David Leese.
Well, hi, everybody. It's Thursday, October 24, 2024, the year of our Lord. And today we have a very interesting, important topic about foreign interference. There's been an inquiry going on, and we'll certainly get into that in a moment. And welcome to our audience, and good afternoon to you, Prairie, and so many other regular listeners and others. We're so appreciative of the kind of interaction that we have with you as an audience, as Canadians and people from around the world who obviously care about the issues that we're talking about. And we really appreciate your questions. And so be sure to think about questions that you have as you think about our next guest. So when I talk about the news on October 24, I did want to share with you three headlines, and you may have noticed a couple of them. One is an interesting article for those of you who do read newspapers like the National Post and the Epoch Times. There's an interesting article in today's National Post by a senior fellow at Frontier about housing. And the headline is "Housing Crisis? Just Move." And it's by Wendell Cox, and he says, Canadians may be solving the housing crisis on their own by moving away from more expensive areas to places where housing is much more affordable. This trend is clear in the latest internal migration data from Statistics Canada. That's almost a Freudian slip there. Not statistics, but Statistics Canada. And it is a tidal wave of people that are moving to less dense, more affordable housing. Does this not make sense? So what's going on here? Well, the largely rural areas of Ontario saw the biggest gain, with a net increase this past year of some 80,000 people moving to areas, and that's 40 times more the rate than we've seen in the previous 5 years. Largely rural areas of Quebec placed second, with a net gain of some almost 80,000, a tenfold increase in their inflow than the previous 5 years. And Calgary ranked as the largest metropolitan area as a destination for some 43,000 people, followed by Ottawa-Gatineau at some 36,000 and Oshawa at 35,000. There's also a lot of people moving to other areas. We've got, for example, the Maritimes are gaining a lot of people as they move to more affordable areas. And so where are they moving from? Well, the largest metropolitan area, Toronto, had by far the largest net loss of some 400,000 people leaving, and Montreal lost some 162,000, Vancouver some 50,000, and there's just a lot of people moving in this country. And I'm curious, have you noticed that? Anecdotally, people moving from one area to another as they seek arguably a better way of life, a more affordable way of life. What are you seeing? So that's one headline I wanted to share with you, and that's, of course, an analysis by Wendell Cox, a senior fellow at Frontier, and be sure to look at the Frontier website for more information. On other news, you may have noticed that we had on October 23 a 50 basis point drop in the interest rate by the Bank of Canada. So now I believe the rate is at 3.75% as inflation continues to moderate and our economy is on the soft side. So again, this is certainly good news as that interest rate lowers. And I suspect, and no one has a crystal ball, but in this December meeting of the Bank of Canada, they'll likely decrease rates again. So what do you think? Is that going to help your life as you see rates moderate a little bit? Maybe you have a mortgage renewing, as certainly in a country where inflation has taken its toll and higher interest rates, this is a trend in the right direction as we try to avoid a recession. In other news, just today, the Liberal government announced a drop in its so-called immigration numbers over the next 3 years. This is the permanent residence category. There's other categories as well that I don't believe there have been announcements recently. But today, this morning, they're reducing the number of permanent residents from 500,000 down to about 395,000. So not a huge number, but a significant drop. That will be in 2025, and 2026 will be reduced from 500,000 to 380,000. And then in 2027, it will continue that downward trend to 365. Now, those are still very large numbers historically. If you look at the number of permanent residences in Canada, if memory serves me correctly, it's averaged usually around 100 to 150,000. But so stay tuned for more analysis about that. But that's an interesting decision, as the Prime Minister acknowledged that the numbers are simply too high. In any case, what do you think about that? Immigration is obviously a very important part of our history and our nation. What do you think? So now today we want to hear from you as we welcome a guest. His name is Noe Chartier. And Noe, I want to warmly welcome you. Noe is a journalist with the Epoch Times, and I've certainly admired your coverage of many different topics, including the inquiry on foreign interference. So a warm welcome to you, Noe.
Thanks, David. Thanks for having me.
And Noe, I know that you have watched this topic about foreign interference for some time. It's interesting. It's hard to believe. And I want to go through some of the basic questions around the inquiry. And you've watched it. For how long have you followed this story, Noe?
Foreign interference really came on a sort of political radar when the first leaks came out. But as you know, we've had an interest in this for a long time at the paper because of China being the foremost perpetrator, according to all the intelligence agencies. So we've had an eye on this. We've had reports on this for a long time, but it really came to the forefront, I think, in the late 2022 when actual intelligence was being leaked and showing a more granular picture of what the government knew and what was happening.
So foreign interference in Canada, and please help us understand what's really going on here, because this is really quite important issue. It's got many different dimensions, but it strikes me that the inquiry really, why was an inquiry set up? Maybe I'm asking you that simple question right off the bat.
The inquiry was the result of a lot of political pressure that stemmed from this steady stream of intelligence leaks. As you can remember, the big one was Global News in the fall of 2022, and then the Globe and Mail started reporting sort of regularly on these as well, and it gained momentum. The opposition parties started to put pressure for having this looked at more carefully. And initially, the government was resistant. As you remember, they first hired David Johnston to look at this, and then he resigned, and it was end of the road in terms of that approach. And then the political parties negotiated over the summer and came together to decide how it would be run, who would be at the head, and all that. So it was, I think it was just this momentum of people, also Canadians in different sectors of society, realizing that there's an issue here that needs to be looked at closely. And if you can remember also what I assess to be probably one of the big hits is when the issue around the targeting of MPs came about, and that everybody said they had no idea that this was happening. They had never been briefed. At first, they tried to put it on the on CSIS, that it's their fault, they didn't brief us and all that stuff. So I think this kind of tipped the scales in terms of also politicians being like, okay, if Chinese spy services are looking at me, maybe I should be told about it and how to better protect myself. So I think this was really a sort of key moment in this whole thing as well.
Yeah, so that's a very powerful summary, Noah, because as I've looked at this issue for some time now, if you talked about foreign interference some 5 years ago, a lot of Canadians would say, "What are you talking about? There's no foreign interference in this country." But the conversation has changed. And it's changed remarkably because, as you referenced, it appears that intelligence agencies were at the heart of frankly leaking. They were kind of acting as whistleblowers of sorts, where they came forward and said, there's a real problem here. And Canadians need to open their eyes up. And that basically created a kind of a firestorm of public reaction saying, what the heck is going on here? And it wasn't really a partisan issue because all parties were kind of accused of this. Is that a fair summary of it?
I think most there at first it does seem it was mostly fingers were being pointed at the Liberal Party in terms of, because they're the party in power in terms of inaction, and some of the leaks that were coming out also were more suggesting that the government could be turning a blind eye because they're benefiting from this. I didn't see it really at first as an issue of like everybody's involved, and some of the signs that there could be involvement of other parties came in some of the leaks, whereas it said candidates from different parties could have been receiving money from a foreign state or something like that. But I think in general, I think it was more geared towards the Liberals for the better part.
All right. So, Noah, can you help us understand who is the commissioner, Marie José Hogue, and who she is, and what basically is her mandate as the head of this inquiry?
She's a judge from the Quebec Court of Appeal, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And she was given at first, as you remember, it was really just geared towards China because this is what all the leaks were saying or showing. But some other parties said, okay, well, let's make it broader. Let's also include Russia and other states and all that stuff. So she was given a broad mandate to examine how foreign interference, if it played a role, whether or not in the last two general elections, and also to examine what are the mechanisms in government to counter the threat. Is it working? How is the information flowing from the agencies to the government? How is the government, building its policy around that and all that stuff? So the latest round of public hearings that we had were more focused on that aspect, and the one that happened in the spring was mostly on the last two elections. So she put out a report last May, an interim report based on the hearings at that time, and she had concluded that there is indeed foreign interference. It didn't impact the general election results, but there's a potential that a couple of ridings were impacted in terms of who became the MP. So you depending on where you sit on the political spectrum, you might say, well, okay, it's not so bad, but then you can say, well, there's no reason why any race should be impacted by a foreign hostile actor, and because of all the ramifications that it entails as well.
So it sounds like certainly the interim report was very interesting because it definitely did confirm, as you noted, Noah, that indeed there is foreign interference in this country. So that in itself has changed the narrative where, as a country, we're actually daring to open our eyes up and see that there is in fact foreign interference. And it's not just simply from one nation like the Communist Party of China, but other nations as well. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, well, perhaps I can give a bit of I can go a little bit in time and explain sort of the rationale for the government to say that it's been really at the forefront of tackling this problem. It's um, that's been their main argument, that to react to foreign interference, they created some mechanisms. There's the SITE task force, which is a group of different intelligence or security agencies that come together and analyze information during elections. And there's the panel of 5 senior bureaucrats that can decide to alert the public whether there's a foreign interference event that meets a certain threshold. So these bodies were indeed created, many years ago. But it followed the 2016 U.S. election and Russian involvement and that kind of stuff. So it seems they were geared to warn the public about something that would be significant, like the hack of a political party or something like that, something that would really be a big event. And fast forward to this interference commission, what it's shown is that, or the evidence that's been public is that, well, Russia was just not involved in those two 2019, 2021 elections. The way they play it, that's not really in their sort of in their modus operandi to interfere that way. So yes, they can have disinformation campaigns and all that stuff, but so to answer your question about whether other countries were involved, for Russia, it wasn't really the case in those 2 elections. And then we have other players. India has also come out as a party, an actor that seeks to interfere. And I think there's also evidence that Pakistan was involved as well. So I think these are the sort of main three players that there's been intelligence revealed about. Like, there hasn't been much. I don't think Iran. I don't think there's any evidence that Iran interfered. That's public. So I would say China definitely probably number 1 by a mile, and then India, and then Pakistan, and I think that summarizes everything.
Indeed. We have, I'm talking with Noe Chartier, who's a journalist with the Epoch Times. He's followed the inquiry on foreign interference for some time. And I have some comments from the audience, from Peter Biker. Money, foreign or otherwise, has infiltrated the management of our governing systems. Oops. Good comment. So, but this is the point. In many ways, the inquiry is confirming, and it's not over yet, that we have a nation that has been infiltrated in many, many different ways. It's kind of like an octopus, isn't it, Noah? It's multifaceted. It's not just simply how, say, foreign actors show up at a nomination meeting for a party candidate. And I mean, this is the irony. In order to vote in this country, you have to be a citizen, you have to have ID, but you can show up at a nomination meeting as a non-citizen, as a person from another country, and that could be orchestrated by who knows who, and you can get your candidate nominated. Is that an example of foreign interference? Potentially.
I mean, yes. If there's a foreign country that organizes or that pushes for a candidate and then uses underhanded means to bring people, the main case that was studied at the inquiries, the 2019 Liberal nomination contest in Don Valley North, Toronto riding. International students being bussed in, being provided with fraudulent IDs because they're not residents of the riding, and being threatened that if they don't vote for a certain candidate, they're going to have issues. So this is all evidence that has been made public at the inquiry.
So tell us more, Noah, about the dynamics where you have parties within the government that have been accused of sitting on this information, of knowing about this foreign interference, but then in retrospect saying in the inquiry that no one briefed them on this. They didn't know about it. You have different ministers supposedly saying, well, we didn't know that there were warnings about foreign interference from these intelligence agencies, but it's only in retrospect that we do. Is that part of the dynamic that's going on? Is kind of an effect, a kind of a head fake, a cover up, basically saying we didn't know?
Um, I don't have all the answers, but I can give you sort of what I'm seeing. I think from a governmental perspective, they're facing, like, even the security agencies, they're facing an array of threats and problems and issues, and so a lot of well, not the 2019, but the 2021 election was around COVID, so there's another sort of layer of complexity of people working from home and all that stuff. So in some cases, that argument can stand, but in general, I think you were accurate to say that it's a threat that's been tracking very low on the order of priority for a long time, and there hasn't been a commission of inquiry on espionage or on terrorism, so we don't know how big those threats are and how massive the government has to react to it on a every single day basis, notwithstanding the sort of geopolitical crises that can be occurring. So just to sort of wrap this up, if we want to have a point of reference or evidence about how the government reacted, I think it's very useful to go and look at the former CSIS director's testimony, David Vigneault, to the inquiry in the spring, as well as all the briefing notes that were meant to be sent to the Prime Minister. And there's some pretty serious language in there. It says Canada is not doing enough. Basically, it's a free-for-all for foreign powers to do whatever they want because it's a low-cost, high-reward endeavor to interfere in Canada. So that was the message that CSIS was to deliver to the Prime Minister. We're lagging behind our allies. So if you take CSIS's opinion for if you give it any ounce of value, then you would know that there's some frustration building there because they're doing the work of collecting all this information. And they're feeling that Canada is not responding or is not equipped well enough to answer it.
So to be really clear, though, the inquiry, as you said, have really dropped some significant bombshells that Canada is like a free field where foreign actors are coming in and waging influence in many, many different ways. And this is not in the interest of our country, is it? Like, why would Canadians care about this issue, Noel? Is there an easy way to summarize that? Because, it's just, obviously, if your democracy is not on the up and up, that's a huge problem.
Well, yeah, it's like you said, like you want your vote to count, you want your interest to be represented. If there's anyone that can come and sort of lowers the power you have or the value you have, then it's an issue. And then we're not even going into disinformation and all that stuff. You want to also be living in an environment where you're not being fed lies, whether created by anybody. So that's also an important factor if you want to make informed decisions about life and politics. So and I think the problem that you raise is like, yeah, we're focusing on foreign interference right now, but there's probably also another area of issues in terms of who's working in government with security clearances that probably doesn't fully play on our side. So that's all. Like, insider threat is another thing that could probably be looked at very intently. And we've had cases in the past where you've had leakers, the one in the RCMP or in the military, and that. So that's also another dimension where you're saying, well, is Canada vulnerable? It's vulnerable on a number of different fronts.
Okay, so this is. It's almost overwhelming here as we kind of open this up. It's almost like this is the phenomenon where now that Canada is finally talking publicly in the form of this inquiry about foreign interference, it's kind of like the tip of the iceberg for many, many different related issues. And I want to give you one example, two of them, in fact. So one of them has to do with I admit to reading a leaked document that was classified, the so-called Sidewinder report that came out of the intelligence agencies, and I think it really was a brilliant report that really talked about the severity of foreign interference in this country in almost every institution. So I think that was a seminal moment, the Sidewinder report, and I encourage people to look at that. And I know that at the Epoch Times you've brilliantly written about that. But another one has to do with it, and I'm just reading a headline from last year, but how Canada, and this was named by a think tank that came out of the United States, and it basically called Canada as a notorious haven for illicit trade, both drugs, money laundering, and all the rest. It's like a safe haven for criminal cartels and foreign influence, and how they work together with foreign governments to do their trade. So if we look at the trade of fentanyl, I'll just read you an example here. Canada has become a safe haven, an international hub for notorious crime groups, as illicit trade in the country is booming, according to the report by an American think tank. Canada has become a safe zone for the world's most notorious crime groups and threat networks that are harming Canada's national security and imperiling the security of other nations, warns a report. And this was done by the International Coalition Against Illicit Economies. So as you look at that whole criminal underworld, as it's related to foreign governments, is that really on the radar of this inquiry in Ottawa?
Not that I know of. It's that's another cup of tea altogether. I think criminality and these kinds of nefarious things hasn't come up as far as I know.
Yeah. So this is where I'm kind of ambivalent about the inquiry. It's great to see it happening, but in my mind, if you look at those kinds of reports I just referenced, including the Sidewinder report as well, we're not really having a full adult discussion about the whole issue of foreign interference, are we? From your perspective, Noah?
In the context of the need to protect national security, personally, I think the inquiry has been really good. I could spend probably months just going through these documents, reading everything, and sort of piecing together, what is most likely to have happened, and sort of draw inferences from it. So I think from that standpoint, like maybe for the public, it's not that great. If people that want to have the names of MPs that are colluding and that kind of thing, it's not going to come out through there. But for investigative journalists, for researchers, academics, for policy makers, I think there's really some really insightful stuff that can be taken from it.
Okay, very good. So where is the inquiry at this juncture? Where is it going in your mind? What's the time frame on this, Noah?
So they finished a round of consultations this week with people from academia, experts. I think former CSIS director Dick Fadden was there, focusing on specific issues like what is foreign interference, or how should parties be able to finance themselves. So they collected this information, and now they're going to go back, and I'm assuming they're going to be writing the report that needs to be tabled by the end of the year. So it's really a short deadline, and the report will probably also have a number of recommendations about the steps that the government should take. What I can say is that the interim report was not really drawing that many conclusions. It was more like the inquiry has heard that this has happened. So in terms of something to come down with more applied judgments, I don't know if it will happen. I don't know if it will just be a summary of information, or it will be like a more something more directive. But we're going to see in the next couple of weeks.
Indeed. Now, one of the things I also found out this past week, I think people have seen this, is that it was fascinating to see the Prime Minister back on the stand again at the inquiry, And can you help us understand simply what the heck is going on here, where he points the finger and says, I have a list of MPs that are somehow compromised by foreign interference, and there's a list of conservative MPs. I know this government has certainly
Yeah.
been on the defensive, but help break us down simply what is going on there?
Well, like you said, it was very interesting to see this because, as you know, the government has been repeating that foreign interference is not an issue to be politicized. So that was what he did there could be construed as that. The other thing that's really important, and I don't know that a lot of people caught it, because if you were following everything closely, then you would know. But what is interesting about this timing is that, well, first of all, it's related to the NSICOP report in June, the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians who are looking at intelligence, and they said that there were semi-witting and witting parliamentarians colluding with foreign powers. So the whole context is about, people who have been clamoring, they want the names and all that. But what was interesting is that just before Trudeau testified, Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc did, and then his National Security and Intelligence Advisor, Nathalie Drouin, as well. And both of them said, there's really nothing to this NSICOP report. There's no traitors in Parliament. We don't see any information that MPs or there's just lawmakers are colluding. So they downplayed this issue very much. They said, there might have been lack of judgment, or there's some. Nathalie Drouin said there's maybe some of those people that would trust less. So they downplayed it very much, the issue of lawmakers being colluding. And then the day after, or a couple of days after, the Prime Minister said, I have names of conservatives who are probably doing this foreign interference. So I think this is also very interesting. So it was a bit of a contradiction. You have people saying there's no issue here, and then you have the Prime Minister saying, well, there's an issue here, and it's the conservatives. The other context is that maybe you've seen this, but what the media did is, as soon as he said it, they ran with the story, and it was the headline. But a little later in his cross-examination, the Conservative Party lawyer asked Mr. Trudeau, he said, do you also have the names of liberals also involved in foreign interference? And Trudeau said, yes, I have a lot of info, and as well as of other parties. And he said that he had not raised this issue because the context is Trudeau was being asked about what he does when he receives information on other parties that are involved in foreign interference. So this is how his comment had come about. But he said, you know what? In the last round of hearings, it was all about the Liberal Party. So that was kind of his explanation of why it was okay to single out the Conservatives.
Okay, so this is my comment. For Pete's sake, this is absurd because, we're dealing with a very important issue, namely foreign interference as a national security item for a country. You think you would want to make sure that you really try to be objective as possible and not indeed politicize the issue. The way I look at it is this is a nonpartisan issue. All parties to some degree are vulnerable or guilty over many years. This isn't just an issue that arose the last 10 years. This is an issue over decades, over many governments. So I would think that Prime Minister would do well to, frankly, keep your powder dry and keep on a level keel here, because this issue is too important for Canadians. What do you, I know that you're covering this as a journalist and you've been doing that very well, but doesn't the Prime Minister also risk of being accused of this being frankly a distraction from some real challenges in his own leadership? Is that part of what the speculation is?
I won't make that call, but I think it's been made. I think Poiliev raised the issue. I think the whole build-up to this comment of the Prime Minister was also to criticize Poilievre for not taking a security clearance. It was as a way to say, well, okay, I know there's some bad apples in your ranks, and the fact that you're not getting the security clearance prevents you from taking action. Poilievre's response is that, well, when you get this kind of information, you're not allowed to act on it because it's the stakes, the national security stakes are too high. So.
Exactly. So, but we want to get to the bottom of this. We don't want foreign interference in our country. And I think that, like, a fascinating example is that when we talk about foreign interference in this country, we see it in so many different ways if we just open our eyes. And I think one of the examples that is really quite stunning is, for example, the reality, and the Epoch Times has certainly been a leader in reporting this, is the presence of actual Chinese police stations in Canada. Is that anywhere on the radar of the inquiry? I mean, this seems bizarre that we don't have the RCMP soundly coming down on that. Like, how is that possible that you have a, quote, sovereign nation of Canada and we have a foreign country putting its police stations here? And why are they here?
Yeah, so this was in fact covered in the inquiry. A lot of questions were asked about it. A lot of, not a lot, but a good number of interesting documents came to light. So when the issue came about, I think it's September 2022, this Spanish NGO came out with this report about overseas Chinese police stations, and they're spread out across the world. And they identified a couple ones in Canada. And as soon as that arrived, I filed an access to information request with public safety, asking, when did you guys know about this? And I'm looking at my watch here. I still haven't gotten back. So that was, that's over 2 years ago, around 2 years ago that I requested that. And I still
so to be clear, there's a Spanish non-governmental organization that spilled the beans on this whole network of Chinese police stations, not just in Canada, but around the world. And then you follow up with a freedom of information request. And it's been how many years since you've even heard back from the Canadian government saying what's going on?
Yeah, well, I was trying to get a scoop on, did the government know before the Spanish NGO came out with the report? And I never got to know because I never got a reply. So I think I was probably given an extension of 460 days or something like that. I don't remember. Like, I've kind of forgot about it. And now the documents have come out at the inquiry. I don't care anymore because it shows that the government wasn't aware. They didn't know this was happening. And when it happened, it looks like the security agencies or different departments got together and started analyzing this, and they did confirm. I think the word they used is they found the information was credible. And then you have a whole timeline of what Global Affairs Canada did on this issue. So I wrote about this topic, and that's the interesting thing is that the government said, or mostly the RCMP saying we're doing this, we're doing that, but all of what happened behind the scenes at the diplomatic level was really interesting, and the government was really proactive about it. This is something that the public wasn't told up to a couple of days ago. So, they were calling the Chinese ambassador, having meetings, doing démarches, diplomatic notes, and they said these need to be shut down. And apparently, at one point, the Chinese government said, we're going to shut down our overseas service centers. And then a couple months later, it seems like it wasn't happening. And you see the GAC, the people at Global Affairs, were not happy that the Chinese government wasn't really cooperating. So this was raised in multiple meetings. So it was a really live issue after the report was published. So they did their work. So what these are, it's subnational government bodies in China. So it's not like the Department of Foreign Affairs, or it's not like the Ministry of State Security, or that. It's like those subnationals who are the provincial and all that. They've created these service centers across the world to help Chinese citizens do some kind of business in terms of renewing driver's license and that kind of stuff, provide help to people abroad. So that's kind of one of the purposes. The other thing is that the assessment is that these were also used as hubs for transnational repression. So going after dissidents or trying to repatriate people through different kinds of operations. So in either case, the Canadian government was clear that this is unacceptable. You can't be running, you can't be running these undeclared desks to serve Chinese citizens renewing licenses. Now, yeah, that can't be happening. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, these are obviously very serious issues, and quite frankly, I'm just shocked that the Canadian government hasn't just said, "You're closing tomorrow. You're done." This is totally unacceptable. We're a foreign country. You have no basis to be here doing this, and that's that. But
I think that was done. I think the RCMP took a different number of steps. They took one step to publicly declare an investigation for the two stations in Montreal, or alleged stations, and now those are suing the RCMP. So there was some work being done. Are there still some that are in operation right now? I don't know. I would assume if it was something that was very valuable for the Chinese, they would find a way to probably still do it.
okay, so I'm talking with Noe Chartier, and he's a journalist with the Epoch Times. He's been covering extensively the inquiry on foreign influence. What do you think? Are you concerned about this issue? Why is it important to you? We'd love to hear you. I've got another comment in the chat from Peter Biker again. A case could be made that we are experiencing asymmetrical warfare waged between or among corporations and states. I think if I understand that comment, we know that in the art of war, asymmetrical warfare is that we don't just pursue kinetic or hot warfare, e.g. fighting wars, but we pursue war in many different ways or avenues. Is that right, Noe?
Oh yeah, different. I mean, the purpose is to defeat your adversary, so you're going to use any which way, and it's best if you're not firing a shot as well.
Exactly. So you can do that in many different ways, right? You can do it through disinformation. I mean, that's a common phrase used by different parties. You can steal intellectual property. I know that from my own experience in the private sector, that has been a major problem in many Canadian businesses, is that parties steal intellectual property. Why develop a new widget if you can just steal the design from someone else that's taken the incredible time and money? And I think this is a very important issue. These things have a real impact on Canadians, as foreign interference has not only an impact on our democracy, but on our pocketbook, our standard of living. Is that really your sense that the inquiry understands the significance of that issue?
It's really narrowly focused on foreign interference. So economic security, that's a whole other espionage, that's a whole other field. And as you said, I think there's been data out there, or at least proclamations, that we could be losing billions in terms of economic output because of theft of IP and all that.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's a major concern. Sherry Turcott says, I think the police stations are in Vancouver. Is that true, Noe? Do you recall where some of those stations were?
Yeah, I think it was Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal, if my memory serves me well. But I think there was about between 6 and 8.
Indeed. So when we look at the inquiry, do you think it has actually really raised and changed the conversation about foreign interference in this country, Noe?
I think so. The amount of information that's now out there available to the public, anybody could just, who's interested in this, can just go to the inquiry website and look at exhibits and just see this summary of intelligence or this report. And of course, there's a lot of redactions, and that's to be expected. But you can still gain a lot more information than before the inquiry. So I think that's a win.
When we talk about different institutions being affected by foreign interference, can you help us understand those other institutions that are being impacted? Like in within our incredible country, we have different institutions that have been designed and set up to really help ensure a high functioning democratic society. So we have the media that's there to speak truth to power. We have the rule of law and courts. We have obviously the executive. We have legislatures. We have a number of institutions. And I guess my question is there concern that foreign interference has been waged through all those institutions? Like I think of universities, where universities have had a myriad of very close relationships with foreign nations, including China. I think of course, the revelations around David Johnson. A lot of us thought he was a very good governor general, but it's really astounding the incredibly intimate relationships, including money, with our universities. So that's one point. And then the other point is, even on the judiciary side, we have the former head of the Supreme Court of Canada, namely the Honorable Beverly McLaughlin, serving on a senior court in Hong Kong, of all places. It kind of begs the issue, how are we really influenced at a very personal relationship level with many of the elites of our nation? Are they governing for us, or are they being kind of hollowed out by foreign actors? Am I being too cynical about this?
I mean, I haven't really looked at it. I think the whole theme of elite capture has been around for a long time, and it could be an aspect where at a certain level of power and wealth, you become more detached from allegiances to your country, or you can be swayed by different interests. So. It's not something I've really looked at, but to your point, I think this is something that's come about, that foreign interference really impacts all levels of government. Even there's been the PRC has been trying to influence the First Nations and all that as well, and get their resources. So that's also out there. And as you mentioned, well, China has the Confucius Institutes that it's been implanting across learning institutions across the world, and that's definitely a tool to shape how Westerners or people from other countries understand China. So, yeah, it's multifaceted for sure.
Okay, so again, I'm talking with Noe Chartier, the journalist with the Epoch Times, about foreign interference. Again, so what do you think? We really appreciate your comments. And it's interesting, when we've talked about immigration earlier, one of the headlines is the current federal government ratchets down a little bit the permanent residency numbers from 500,000 to 395,000 this year, or sorry, in 2025. The question becomes, the importance of managing that file is very important for security reasons. And I think that one of the things that I'm fascinated by is the whole reality that, would you believe, we haven't necessarily been vetting a number of people. We know a number of security problems where, frankly, known terrorists have come into our nation. People who've done incredible violence and damage as terrorists have been welcomed into our country. Is that anywhere on the radar as you look at foreign interference?
No, not really. I think that's a separate issue. I think your immigration and security screening and radicalization, I think that's another kind of issue. I mean, some of it could have state ramification, but in general, it's I think it's at a lower level. For sure, these individuals coming in might have links back to entities that are considered terrorist organizations by the Canadian government. So I don't see it as being a facet of foreign interference.
Okay. Well, look, I want to thank you very much, Noe Chartier with the Epoch Times, for joining us today for this important conversations about foreign interference, and certainly the inquiry on foreign interference in particular. So I want to commend you for your work. Where can we find you as we wrap up today's discussion on what's your handle?
Handle on X is N Chartier ET. Yeah, obviously on Epoch Times, writing a bunch of articles every week, different topics, federal politics, and foreign interference when I have a chance.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Noe, for joining us. And thank you to our audience for joining us today and for your very thoughtful comments and questions. And be sure to join us next week as we have the same type of live discussion. We'll be talking with the Honorable Joe Oliver, the former Finance Minister and Minister of Natural Resources, who will be joining us about the state of Canada today. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Leaders on the Frontier. We're a nonpartisan think tank. We explore ideas, policy, and practical solutions that can make a difference in the lives of Canadians. We do not accept any government funding. We work for you. Thank you for supporting Frontier. Visit fcpp.org to give. While you're there, be sure to check out our latest articles and research. Without open discussion and debate, you're not thinking, nor are you free. Comment below. We'd love for you to join the conversation.
Well, thank you very much, Noe. You did a great job, and I hope you enjoyed our